Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all keeping well today, and hopefully it's sunny in whatever part of the country that you're in. Uh, Thankfully, we've been experiencing some nice weather the last couple of days and couple of weeks, so long may that continue. Delighted to have you join this webinar this afternoon. I am Michelle Murphy. I am a director of Collins McNicholas Recruitment, and we have offices nationwide. So we do recruit across lots of different disciplines, and contracting, which we're talking about today, is one of the solutions we do offer as well. This webinar is entitled Operating Smarter with Contractor Talent. And is it time to pivot? And I think it's a really good discussion point because a lot of companies do think about contractor talent for particular needs, but maybe are a little bit cautious about making that step or taking that step to get the first contractor in. But obviously, once that starts, they get a lot more confident in the process. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Jimmy Sheehan. Jimmy is Managing Director of Contracting Plus, one of Ireland's leading providers of tax accounting and financial services for contractors and self-employed professionals. And Jimmy has a strong background in accounting and business advisory, and I know he speaks on a regular basis at various events around contracting, and is a contributor on Ireland's contractor market and co-author of the annual Ireland's Project Economy report, which I know Jimmy's going to talk about shortly and give you an overview of that. Also delighted to have Padraig Moynihan. Padraig is an accomplished operations manager with extensive experience across a diverse range of industries, specifically medical device and biopharmaceuticals. So again, covering the life sciences space. And he has extensive people management experience, leading teams and sole contractors within multiple disciplines. So again, a proven track record in working with contractors on site. So it's good to hear both sides of experience and insights and have a discussion around that. And I suppose really what we are seeing ourselves in Collins McNicholas at the moment is an appetite for contractors. It certainly is an area that companies are exploring. And as you can imagine, there's certain sectors that would lend itself to contracting a little bit more. And we are certainly seeing that across the life sciences and engineering space, but also in IT. And that has been the case over the last number of years. And if you can imagine when talking to companies, the reason why contractors become a topic of importance is obviously enabling the company to scale their teams as needed and often and quickly because there's a project at hand. Obviously, access to niche skills and expertise that they might need for a particular project. And that's something that we talk about with their clients on a regular basis. And it helps them then deliver those transformational projects that are needed to be delivered within a particular time frame. And so contractors are very, very beneficial to come into to a particular site and work on a particular project. But we will talk about different aspects of having contractors on site as we go through this particular webinar, and we'll have some discussion. Please do add in any questions you have to the Q&A button there, the Q&A function, and we'll take those questions as we go along. And hopefully we'll get to cover anyways through our discussion. So to start, before we go into that discussion point, I'm going to hand over to Jimmy. And Jimmy Sheehan from MD from Contracting Plus is going to bring us through the recent report on Ireland's project economy, some really good stats and data to share with you. So I'll hand over to Jimmy. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. Yep, great stuff. So the focus of the chat this morning is to answer some questions and share some information on why contract talent can often be a better approach to getting work done than maybe hiring full time. So I'm going to focus on the elements of the report that might be most interesting to you. The research in full can be viewed on Ireland's projecteconomy.ie, and it's the only research that looks at the self-employed sector or contracting sector in all of Europe. So the best place to start is to look at the contractor profile. So it helps you focus on the right type of person to hire and how they'll interact with your company. So the average age is taken across all respondents, but in 2026 we saw the numbers under the age of 30 dropping, which makes sense as a contractor needs to have enough experience to step in and hit the ground running. So the lower age was potentially attributed to a rebalancing from a lot of overhiring of IT roles a couple of years back. But what was particularly interesting were the number of over 50s and over 60s. Numbers in both of these groups increased, which signals increased engagement from those with the most experience. The industry, as you can see, remains male dominated, though the female participation increased ever so slightly. I do feel there's a missed opportunity here by companies, as many females take career breaks to raise families. They don't lose their experience. They could come back in and do great work and do it on a flexible basis that allows them to integrate back into the workforce without incurring that penalty of the salary dip. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But they'll also end up doing great work for your company. And personally speaking, from our own organization in Contracting Plus, we've had huge success in engaging ladies who are coming back into the workforce after a career break over the years. In terms then of income, um, the people you engage as contractors are highly skilled, which is reflected in their daily rates. Last year, the females in their 50s were earning more than their male counterparts, which was super to see. Though unfortunately in 2026, the data has seen this drop back a little. At the launch of the results this year, one of the research professors suggested there was a need for companies to pick a rate for the role and offer it to the right candidate, male or female, and not to go below that rate if the expectation of the candidate was lower. So I suppose we all have a part to play in narrowing the gender pay gap nationally. He also suggested, however, that female contractors need to make sure they're asking for the same rate that a male colleague will be asking. So maybe a little bit of confidence there, and how can we bring some of that confidence into it? The headline annual earnings there of 118,000, that's not necessarily the cost to your company, as you might not need a 40-hour a week person, or you might not need the full 12 months of that person. And in the report, there is a summary of the average day rates across many industry types. I'm moving pretty fast, so as Michelle said, if you do questions, pop them in. I'm happy to answer those afterwards, but I don't want to bore you through PowerPoint. Um, you can see too that the average contract length is 14 months. Contractors are typically engaged for specific projects where you want to either beef up your in-house team to get work done, to get through that work faster, or maybe create a team for a specific project. And then when the work is done, the contractor moves on until the next time you need them. There was additional research completed actually a couple of years back by one of the same researchers for Ireland's Project Economy. And that research found that when a company's total headcount was made up of at least 11% contractors, those companies grew faster, became more profitable, and in the process created more net employment. So contracting is not a replacement for employment, but rather a way for companies to build, to innovate, grow, and ultimately become stronger. It's not on screen, but one of the other pieces of information that might be of interest is the average time to find the right contractor. So that's just 2 weeks, which is much faster, I'd imagine, and Michelle can probably answer this, than a permanent hire. And then you only need to give 30 days notice when you feel that the work that contractor is doing is not something the company needs anymore. And that's built into the contract. There's no payment to make for holidays, there's no employer's cost because this is a commercial arrangement. And I'll come back to money and commercial arrangement in a second. In terms then of industry breakdown, I'm not going to talk through the industry breakdowns as you're probably already well ahead of me reading those faster than I can say them. But the key thing here is that contracting doesn't just happen in what might be considered the typical areas of engineering, IT, project management. It's also a great option for finance, for marketing, for compliance and governance. Basically, if you need work done, there's someone out there with the skills you need, and then it's the job of Collins McNicholas to go and find them for you. In terms of how the contractors are feeling, they're happy. They're happy with how they work. The detail is there on the slide. You can read it there. I'm happy to share the slides afterwards as well, so you have a bit more time to look at them. So rather than trying to read ahead, it's probably just worth mentioning here that as a country, our policy has a bit of catching up to do. We have a bit of an issue, I suppose, where there's no consistency among government departments when determining if someone is an employee or a genuinely self-employed professional. When someone wants to be self-employed and they want a contract and they see how much more they enjoy work and life, and they're acting in a very much a contract capacity, client to client to client. It's frustrating for us sometimes as to why government departments try to push them into employment. However, that's where compliance becomes really, really important. And that's what we do at Contracting Plus. You find the right person, or working with Michelle and her team, you find the right person. And and then you want to know that that person, as a contractor, has a limited company structure, has commercial insurances, is tax compliant. There's a good solid contract in place. So that's what we do. We do all of that. So you then have the peace of mind. So you and the contractor can just focus on getting good work done. It's also worth saying that while there's no specific metrics about how much someone should earn before they're suitable to be taken on as a contractor, it's more important to look at the role. So you can take on John as a contractor if he's going to work on reception Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. He's not a contractor. He's an employee. And that's a really easy example. But if you had any roles that might not feel as clean cut, then that's what we're here for. We're happy to guide people from that point of view. Um, the productivity and performance metrics, again, I'm sure no one here has yet landed on the perfect balance of working from home and working from the office that pleases everybody. Um, but this is an interesting one. Contractors actually aim for a 50-50 split on average. And on screen, you can read that they see a clear benefit to both. Um, Personally, I believe people do tend to learn faster when they're in the office, surrounded by their colleagues, listening, hearing, collaborating is much easier. I was at a conference yesterday, and one of the speakers talked about taking on 35 graduates a year pre-COVID, uh, and and they would hold on to around 30 of those graduates every year, and those people would typically stay with the company for 3 to 5 years. In the most recent batch of 30 something graduates, they're keeping two. But look, that's a different discussion for a different day. I've gone off on a tangent, as I tend to do. I'll come back on track then. Uh, in the research, there were three different groupings. One were the contractors themselves. Another group consisted of the companies who engage clients. What you're reading on screen now are the reasons given by companies like yours as to why they use contractors. The third group consisted of the recruitment companies who match the right contractor to the role you need filled. But across all three groups, the reasons were largely similar in result. Um, Again, thinking into the future, uh, these sentences here come straight from the research. Again, I'm not going to read them all, but what I will do is send on the slides. In all of this, in all of the data, and there's a lot of the data available in the full report. The one here that stands out for me is number four. All of the others are technical or regulatory knowledge. So it's interesting to see that companies are also looking for that the human skills or the soft skills in terms of when they're looking for contractors as well. I wanted to come back to the cost of contractors because people can look at it and sometimes go, God, that's a lot of money to pay for somebody, but you don't have pension costs or holiday pay or sick pay or employers PRSI. But but thinking about taking on a contractor is an important consideration. When you pay a contractor, there are different ways of treating that payment. So you might add the cost to your P&L as a consulting cost, and that will reduce the profit the same way an employee salary would. However, if you're taking on this person to work on a specific project and your company plans on capitalizing that project, it'll become an asset, if you like, that project, then the cost of hiring your contractor might not affect the company profit. It could be treated as part of the overall investment cost. And then depending on the project, You might also be looking at availing of R&D tax credits. And that being the case, you can get tax relief on the cost of the contractors you hire as part of the overall project cost. Now, I'm not going to get into R&D tax credits here, but it's an important consideration. And your CFO or your board might thank you for looking at contract workers as part of an overall project. A contract with a contractor is also a really good way to test drive a person, so to speak. Should the project turn into a new full-time role, you've had the opportunity of seeing how this person works, how they fit into your culture, before you commit to them on a more permanent basis. Then confidence, I think, is an important piece. So that the whole report is built around what they call the confidence index. And it goes from -100 where you're not confident at all to +100 where you're totally confident, absolutely no doubt in your mind. Confidence in the contracting sector has dipped slightly in each of the last 2 years. This is directly related to a certain presidency, so we're probably in for another couple of years of uncertainty there. But that uncertainty is something we've all become a little bit used to. That said, while the confidence has dipped, 51% still believe that contracting will increase over the next 3 to 5 years, and 32% believe it will stay the same. So over 80% of people are positive or reasonably positive, excuse me, about contracting and how contracting will fit into companies over the next 3 to 5 years. Then just that's pretty much me. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to pass back to you, Michelle, but I'm happy to take any questions or elaborate on any of those points.
Thank you, Jimmy. Great oversight there. And, again, it's a great report. It's a lengthy report, so it's always great to get a snapshot from your good self. And very interesting just to see the success, achieved. The contractors are happy in the roles, 84% satisfied with their work, 87%, the rate of pay, 81, flexible hours. So there's a lot to be said as far as I suppose really the sentiment of how contractors are feeling when they're working on site, because obviously they're coming with a very particular niche set of skills, and that fits to what they want to do really, and that looks really positive. Plus, also you mentioned there the confidence that the contracting requirements will be ongoing for companies, and
Yeah.
that's good. And we'll touch on that in a moment. Obviously, we're talking about contractor talent, and is it time to pivot? And as I said earlier, often companies grapple with the idea, is it time to take on a contractor? Should we look for somebody perm? You mentioned about the time to hire as well, being much shorter. So again, that certainly has a plus. But I'm going to bring Padraig in here from his experience. Within life sciences and manufacturing and that whole space. And I suppose really just to get a sense of knowing that you've worked with contractors yourself, Padraig, what business conditions, I suppose, would you have seen to trigger a serious look at contractor talent? Was it requirements and project speed, cost, or was it something else? I suppose it'd be good just to share your insights on that. You're just on mute there, Padraig. I'll get you to, yeah. Great, thank you.
Because after COVID, I'm still finding myself out. So good afternoon. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to join the panel here today. The two main factors I would have seen for companies looking to pivot towards contractors would have been number one, short to medium term projects, particularly CapEx projects. And the second one then would have been more the speciality or the more niche technical areas like quality assurance, validation in particular, where again there might be short-term projects where that validation expertise is required for maybe 12 months and probably not more than that. But predominantly in my experience, I was seen in quality assurance validation and absolutely then in project management. And just to bounce off Jimmy's point there about I suppose the male female split there in validation, I would have seen predominantly females as the taking up the contracting roles, whereas in project management then it would have been heavily on the male side, would have been taking up those particular roles. Just a point note.
Okay. And it's again that gender gap, as we mentioned, it's 27% female, 72% male. Hopefully that obviously will get smaller as time goes on and more people consider contracting and as we know about STEM and that whole area of trying to encourage more female
Yeah.
um, candidates into the whole engineering space. I suppose really comparing the true cost of contractors versus full-time hires beyond salary, would that have come into play, as far as you mentioned CapEx projects, Padraig, would you have seen that as being a big discussion point?
As in the cost of the recruitment, is it?
The hire, yeah.
Yeah, in general, what I would have seen, particularly my time in the biopharma sector, is that if you need, say, for example, if you need if an FT employee, you're talking 3 months plus
Mm.
higher time, whereas for looking for a contractor, and a lot of it would have occurred as well by word of mouth from different contractors and people who would have known people that are available from contracting. I'd have seen people start in a week,
Mm.
probably, and as Jimmy said there, averaging 2 weeks, but probably nothing more than that. Whereas again, if you're looking for your FT, it's definitely 3 months plus.
Can be, certainly. It depends on the niche, the area of certain
Yes,
part that they're coming from. But again, there's a whole process to follow there. And,
absolutely.
again, that's where companies might be considering the fact that that ramp up time would be certainly shorter to bring somebody in that basis. What about retention? Again, it's a key question a lot of companies would ask. If I take on a contractor for 6, 12 months, is there a possibility they get offered something else? Have you seen that? And they go to another project for their finish
Yeah,
time?
in general, what I would have found, say, if when you're negotiating with a contractor initially, and if their ask for their hourly rate is reasonable and that's accommodated, then I wouldn't have frequently encountered a situation where somebody would have left or looked to have left mid-contract. However, I have seen an occasion where somebody came in and we just weren't able to accommodate their hourly rate, but they agreed to join anyway. And after, I think it was 5 months, then they secured a different contract with the rate they wanted, and they left. So I think definitely in contracting side, the how the company engages with them as well.
Yeah.
Does the company regard them as a temporary contractor, and they're almost regarded that way, or they're regarded as an employee full stop. So I think that the engagement with the contractor with the company is crucial, obviously, but also as important is the company's engagement with the contractor as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a moment. And I suppose just any kind of early warning signs that you're within a team that the structure isn't able to keep up with the business demands. Again, would you see that as being something that you'd have experienced in the past, that you'd had to bring somebody in?
I think in general, what I would have found that is contractors generally feel a lot more potentially confident in highlighting gaps or shortfalls in resources. Um,
Mm.
Again, that's probably coming from thinking that they're there on a temporary basis. But I think in general the feedback from contractors can be a bit more straightforward and probably early as well, in my experience. Again, depending how the team is managed. But that would have been what I would have generally seen. Now there will be
Yeah.
contractors there who will maybe some contractors might be more introverted and they just keep going and focus on getting A, B, and C done, and then choose not to probably integrate much with the company as well.
And I suppose that's an important question. Obviously when they're onboarded and contracting plus helps somebody to get themselves started as a contractor, and that when they, especially if it's new to them, is getting them integrated into the team. And we certainly want to talk about that as the right balance between integrating contractors, what has worked well as far as culture, you know, versus, integrating them versus keeping them independent. I suppose either of you have you heard or seen any of the kind of I suppose tools that work well or what works well as far as integrating the contractors.
I would think what works well is the number one, it depends on obviously the contractor's level of engagement with the company. Do they see the contract as literally a contract and that's it, or are they maybe playing a longer game and maybe looking to get out of contracting and just see, could this potentially turn into a full-time opportunity for them? I think the company's engagement again is crucial and about including the contractor and regarding the contractor as much as possible, like they would a full-time employee. Now there will obviously be benefits and aspects of the job, like say health insurance and pension, that won't come into play just by the very nature of the contracting arena. But there are other seemingly minor things like say, including people in maybe Christmas party invites and work nights out and that as well, even small things like that. And if the employee is getting, a small gift, during the summer or whatever that the contractor could be afforded that as well, maybe, So I think there's little things that can be done that can make a huge difference to a contractor, that they feel more part of the company. But some companies will accommodate that very well. Others are maybe a bit more, not hardline, but maybe black and white about the borders between.
Yes, keeping independent versus not. Jimmy,
Yeah.
did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just I might come back even to before that, and you mentioned the onboarding piece, and a big part of how any of us might feel in a new role is how confident we are about the information we have about the company and how everything's going to work. And I think that's a big part. We'd work, as you know, Michelle, very closely, where a lot of the time a contractor might be a first time contractor, so you might find somebody who wants to try a contracting role. They're moving from PAYE employment where their salary's been looked after, the money's just landed in their bank, and they don't really understand everything else that goes on behind that. So part of our role at the start is to explain everything to them. What does €500 a day or €400 a day actually mean in your bank account? Padraig mentioned pensions. So we have a pensions business, we've got a mortgage business, all attached, contracting plus financial and mortgage navigators. And it's that piece of, well, you're being paid more as a contractor because you maybe don't have all of the little what I might call employment perks, such as pension and healthcare, but that extra income you have is, we show you maybe how much you might put into your pension, and then our pension advisors can show you how that grows over time. There's insurance policies against when you get sick. You can still take out a LEA healthcare or a VHI policy, and that's a tax. There's tax relief on that. So there's lots of other little things, so that by the time the person lands on site and is working with you or working with Porrig, or whoever the case might be, all that financial piece, they go, oh, okay, now I fully understand all of that, and at the end of the day, I'm still getting this much money into my bank account, and once the client is paid, that's going to come in, and then it's to just to touch on another point Porrig made, and it's I think it's true. They might be playing the longer game and they engage more. We found that the contractors finish a role and they start another role somewhere else, and they might end up going back to the same client after a certain period of time, because that client now has another need for that specific skill set. And like anything, if you perform well, if you find a good plumber, well, actually, if anyone finds a good plumber, let me know, because it can be difficult to find. But if you find a good plumber, you'll keep that number in your phone and
Yes.
you'll ring that person the next
Yeah.
time you need them. So there is that piece there of, you're as good as your last job.
Yeah.
And if you work well with the agency and you work well with your client, then the recruitment agent who's looking after the contractor and looking after you as the person in the company who's looking for people, they're looking after their people and they're going to find good people for you. And I think it's cyclical like that.
It is.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the whole referral piece as well. If there's a good contractor, as you said, that news will travel, and companies will certainly want to bring them back again, or hiring managers. Even if the
yeah.
hiring manager moves on to another company, they have their little, I suppose, their black book of
The black
contractors.
book is still
Yeah,
there. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
And I suppose really around that, and it's just something you mentioned there, Jimmy, earlier, that is traditionally would it be in engineering, as Park mentioned, validation and project management, those type of roles. But recently we've actually worked with a senior HR manager, who hadn't even thought about ever being a contractor, but the opportunity arose for them to do so. And, with the help of Contracting Plus and that, I suppose, the fear that they had initially of the unknown about taking that first step as a contractor into the organization, making it seamless and simplifying that for them certainly was a huge plus because it lets them just get on with the job at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself, I think a lot of professionals may not realize until they hear it, obviously, a few times that is there to help them if they want to take the step into that contractor space. But as you said, the softer skills, finance, HR, seen more and more of companies deciding to go the contractor route for
Yeah.
interim needs and projects, so which is great. And just on this, I suppose the knowledge gap, and it's something a company was asking me about. Obviously, if you bring in a contractor with a very particular niche set of skills or experience, and they finish their contract after 6, 12 months, and there's a gap there where they're gone, and then they may not have somebody to pick that up. I suppose it'd be good just to get a sense of where the companies can make sure that that doesn't happen. And maybe, Padraig, would you have seen that in the past?
Yes, in general, there what I would have seen is apart from contractors, say, which tended to be the exception in fairness, that would have pulled out of contract early, then I suppose the onus then is on the company to have the succession planning in place. So if someone comes in on a 12-month contract, they assume that that's max 12 then. So I think it's up to the company then at that point then to either have another contractor or another option lined up, or to approach that particular contractor with a view to extending the contract in a timely fashion. Don't leave it to the last week where the person probably for that particular contractor, if they're anyway good, has already found another contract. So to get in early. And I think that's where the engagement, the companies, the two-way engagement with the contractor is important as well. That if a contractor feels part of the culture in the company to a certain extent, then if everything is going well for them as regards the contract, it would make sense for them then to maybe take up another 12 months or whatever, 23
Mm,
months contract with that company. So I think there's just because someone's a contractor, I think the onus is almost, or the work to be done by the company is almost slightly higher, that you have to make more of an effort to engage with them. Because again, like, I know we're dealing with, say, Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Galway here, but essentially, this is essentially still Ireland, and all these cities are just little streets, and everybody, so
mm.
someone's positive reputation, as Jimmy said about the plumber, the electrician, carries. So yeah, I think an awful lot of it will go back to, as long as the contractor is delivering on what they said they would, and hopefully exceeding that then, but maintaining that engagement, software side is crucial.
And would you see companies maybe, trying to upskill people in certain niche areas, then realizing that there's a gap potentially?
It depends if it's going to be a full-time, longer term.
Requirement, yeah.
Absolutely, then the I suppose contractor can be viewed then as almost a stopgap until
Yeah,
a longer option is secured. But whereas if it's a project situation, I think in general the contracting is definitely the more attractive option
yeah.
for the whatever company it is.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Really
Look, at
more,
again, it
yeah,
could be a project need per se, but then a longer term requirement might present itself where you need to look at the skills gap overall. A
yeah.
question in here, I suppose, how do you see the balance between permanent and contract talent evolving over the next 3 to 5 years? Jimmy, I'm going to give you that one. And based on the report, it's positive.
Yeah, I mean, it's very positive. Last year's report, the 2025 report, focused very much talking about like blended workforces and how they were becoming more the norm. And I think it's almost like we've got to stop talking about blended workforces because they're already here, and that blended between, there's a need for employees, and employees do all the work that needs to be done. And then the leaders of the company, the directors, will be involved in this, the strategy and the planning. And then from time to time, you're going to have a scenario where, and pretty much all the time, you potentially have a scenario where a contractor would add benefit because there's a certain project, or maybe there's a backlog of work um, in a certain area where you can bring on a project team or whatever that case might be. People around the world globally want to work more like you. Like, we had digital nomads was a term 3 or 4 years ago, and it's variations of that. The issue we face, not just in Ireland, but actually across the globe, is that governments, policymakers can't actually keep legislation up uh, to date at the pace that how people want to work, how people want to engage, and we talked about work-life balance. You don't hear that as much anymore, but you probably don't hear that as much anymore because people are choosing to work in different ways. They're choosing more flexibility. Contracting fits into a part of that. Contracting is a way of working. Full-time employment is a way of working. Fixed-term employment contracts are a way of working. And we've all these pockets and ways of working, and it doesn't matter which one you go into, you pay tax in the exact same way as an individual. Um, but I think, going back to the point I made earlier about companies, if we think about the people who are watching online today and thinking, okay, is contracting something I should think about as a company, from a company perspective, is it's going to bring, like Padraig mentioned, it's going to bring knowledge into the company that
Yeah.
currently doesn't exist in the company. That's why you're bringing that in. And there will be transfer of knowledge before that person leaves again. Will there be a knowledge gap? Yeah, maybe there will be, because people can only take up so much through osmosis or listening, but maybe it's okay that there's a big knowledge gap because you don't need as much of that knowledge because that project is ended. You just need now enough knowledge to
Yeah.
maintain
Get it
whatever has been
through.
put in place. But the more you bring in contractors into your organization for those specific projects, and I say contractors, what I mean is specific knowledgeable experience where people can come in and bring a different viewpoint. I mean, I think that's, if companies always have the same people thinking in the same way, and they don't bring in some outside thoughts, um, you don't know what you're missing out on. It's
Fresh
great
ideas.
because you've got great retention as
Yeah.
as a business, and you're obviously a very good employer, that people are staying with you, and there's not a lot of turnover. But what are you missing out on? So it's lovely to bring in somebody new with a different perspective every now and
Yeah.
again to help broaden everyone's views around the table.
I'm sure you've seen that, Porrick, as well in the organizations you've worked with. That bringing in that knowledge for that period of time can, that fresh perspective and those new ideas can maybe even spur on more motivation internally if the team integrate with that contractor and learn new idea and learn new skills.
Yeah, like absolutely. Yeah, and to Jimmy's point there, contractors by their very nature, well, in general, they'll have worked in more companies, they'll have encountered more situations, encountered more, say,
Yeah,
project challenges or whatever area of expertise they have. So the knowledge that they're bringing into a business, or potentially bringing into a business, is massive, say, compared to hiring an FT employee maybe who's worked maybe in one or two companies previously.
yeah,
So I think that isn't to be sneezed at. And also, obviously, depending on the type of the personality the contractor is, I can maybe, if you're bringing a more outgoing person to a team that is generally introverted, then that can mix things up nicely there as well.
yeah.
Obviously, then the flip side can apply as well, but that's where hopefully your preliminary research and on the person and their work will pay off.
Yeah. Okay. Just conscious that we're coming to the end of it, the webinar now. So, there's some great insights there. And I think certainly for companies that might be thinking of that pivot to contractors, to certainly explore it, and come and talk to the experts who, have been involved in assisting other companies maybe in finding the contractors they need, and obviously then onboarding them with Jimmy and the team at Contracting Plus. The last question I would say is, the one piece of advice you'd give to an organization considering their first move into contractor talent. So that what would be that one piece of advice you would say to ensure that they get it done right?
Talk to you, Michelle.
Good answer. Jimmy, brown envelope in the post. Um, no, but again, I suppose from an onboarding perspective on your side of the house.
I, I'd say explore it. It's like anything new. Whether you get I don't know, a new piece of technology, or like we're all grappling with learning AI at the moment, and we kind of go, oh yeah, I must do that, or I must do that, or I must try something new, or I must do that piece of work that needs to get done. It's like, well, do the piece that you hate most first thing in the morning, just and put the time
Mm.
aside to do that. I think it's the same for anyone, whether they're in HR online right now, or they're in procurement, or whatever their role. If they're involved in that piece of, I need to find talent, I think the next hire you're making is why don't you compare? Why don't you hire or interview on both sides,
Yeah.
a full-time employee and a contractor, and see the type of skills and experience that come at you. And if it doesn't work out this time, try it again next time, because sometimes you have to try things two or three times before it sticks. But I think the biggest thing, biggest piece of advice I'd say is just try it, because inertia is the very thing that stops us doing the things that ultimately give us the best impact over the long term.
Yeah, and a positive experience certainly will spur on more of contractor solutions if needed in the future. Padraig, anything that you would say from maybe when the person starts on site or gets on board?
I've mentioned a few. Definitely, I think engagement. I
Mm,
think it's a positive experience for the employee as well, and the company will gain a good reputation among the contracting community. But also from the company's point of view, if it's like anybody, if someone is engaged, okay, if they're contracted to do A, B, and C, a more engaged person will do A, B, C, and D. So, it's win-win for the contractor who feels part of the company and the culture, and it's a win for the business where you get that higher level of engagement from both the personal level and more than likely then follows on the workload level.
and really good point there, Padraig. And I think reputational, it's really positive for the company's reputation if contractors are talking to others. I always say the good news like that certainly travels, but unfortunately, negative news travels faster. So, make sure that a positive experience is shared, and that's certainly is really good advice. So, look, we've come to the end of the webinar. I really appreciate the time, Jimmy Sheehan from Contracting Plus, and Padraig Moynihan for sharing his experience working with contractors on site. I would say certainly download the Ireland's Project Economy report. Jimmy has given a really good snapshot of it earlier, but there's some really good pointers in there, really delving into the life of a contractor and what the research is telling us. And also we have Collins McNicholas have published our salary guide for 2026 in the last few weeks, and we have dedicated a section of that to contracting and contractor rates. And again, Jimmy has actually also given us a piece to a commentary with that contracting salary guide. So I would say is if there is a need on the contracting side, please come and talk to us, because hourly rates are there as a guide on that particular report. But again, it really will depend on the experience that you need and who's available. So we can guide companies to that, be it their first time going through the contracting process or have done so in the past. We'd be delighted to give you some support and guidance. So thank you very much. Please do reach out to any of us if you have further questions, and have a wonderful rest of your week and enjoy the sunshine.
Thanks,
Thank
Michelle.
you.
Thanks for inviting me along.
Thank
Thank you.